are voices from the future, and they're calling all of our leaders. Whose voices do you hear? Whose voices do you heed? And how do you know?
I think it's so interesting that if you walk around campus, there are historic markers sort of sporadically placed. There's one on Bascom Hill that talks about campus being a center for protest, but it doesn't mention at all that the Black student protest and the Black student strikes, for example, was one of the largest, if not the largest protest on campus.
So my first name is Harvey and my last name is Long. I arrived in 2014 at the University of Wisconsin-Madison to pursue a master's degree in library and information studies. When I came in 2014, as a part of my fellowship in the Library and Information Studies program, I worked in the university archives. And I noticed that Black students were essentially erased from the narrative of the university. Everything that we have in the university archives is from the perspective of the administration. So the Black student voice, in a sense, is erased. So I immediately wanted to restore this narrative and sort of contextualize the experiences of Black students from the perspective of the Black student, because it was missing.
Hi, welcome to Cutting Class. I'm Mark Mederson, and the clip you just watched was from Voices, the first of 7 short documentary films we'll be talking about today. All of these films were produced, shot, and edited by University of Wisconsin-Madison students as part of a journalism course. The course, J475, is taught by Pat Hastings. I'm the graduate student assistant for the course. Again, the clip you just watched was part of a film called Voices, produced by our first student filmmaker today, Marquise Mays. Marquise, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. Tell us about that clip that we just watched.
The clip that we just watched is the introduction to my film. It pretty much puts out this bold statement that the University of Wisconsin-Madison doesn't archive or document or save the history of Black students on this campus. So that clip was to start off my documentary, to contextualize the reasoning behind looking for this history and why it's so important that we find it.
From pretty much the first day of class, I remember you had a pretty good idea of what you wanted your film to be about. Tell me why this topic, the return of the Black Cultural Center to the UW campus, why you felt that this was the story you wanted to tell.
I felt that this story was so necessary to tell because of the fact that a lot of us don't really realize that there was a Black Cultural Center in 1969. I also don't think we also realize what led to the first Black Cultural Center, like the events that led to the first Black Cultural Center, and it was through Black student activism. It was through Black students saying no and refusing and doing things outside of the box and with new tactics and just a new way of doing things so differently for what was done before, that this story was so necessary to tell, especially like in relation to our current political climate. I feel like currently a lot of Black students on this campus and students of color, period, feel helpless. They don't feel welcome. They feel hopeless here. And I want this documentary, I want this story about Black students to remind us that we come from a long, long legacy of brilliant, courageous, and brave Black students who have trailblazed this campus in so many different ways and have set something up for us in a way for where we can continue to do this and continue to feel the passion for what we do and not feel like we're helpless. And I think the story was so necessary to tell, especially with the new Black Cultural Center opening up so soon, that we take this as our responsibility and our time to really put all into the center. Put all into the center as far as programming, as far as making sure that this space is safe for us in all aspects of our life, and then also expanding Blackness in a way, expanding the narrative of Blackness, the diaspora of Blackness, and also addressing the intersections that lie within Blackness. I think this story, the reason why I decided to do it was, one, I wanted people to know about the expansive history of Black students on this campus. So it's so necessary because it kind of gets overshadowed a lot by the university archives. So I thought it was a very, very important story to tell.
So for most of the students that take the class, this is their first and probably only documentary film that they'll ever make, but you've made them in the past and you plan on making them in the future. Tell me about your motivation for using the documentary film medium as the way to tell stories.
I find something interesting about being able to remove yourself from like writing someone's story. I find it very interesting because coming into the School of Journalism, I didn't think of myself as a strong writer. And it was something about having to write somebody else's story down and not being able to let them have that medium and let them have that time or that moment to tell it for themselves. I think that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to choose a documentary route. And then also, I think another reason why is because I think currently the way that journalism is going, or how traditional journalism has always been, it's always been focused on being objective and being so, just straight facts and things of that nature. And I think documentary filmmaking or just documentary period kind of allows for emotions to be put into something. I know that coming in as a student journalist, I never wanted to compromise myself for a story. I never wanted to compromise my identity for a story. I feel some type of way when I have to write about race relations, and I didn't want to remove myself just to put something in for a story. So I'd rather do that visually, removing myself from it, but also being able to show what visually is going on. I think that's the reason why I chose documentary filmmaking, and that's why I'm going to continue to do it in the future.
Like I said, and like you said, you have had experience at this before, but what are some things you learned by taking Pat's class, by taking this journalism course, and what are some things you learned through the process of making this film?
I think one thing I learned was patience. This semester was very, very busy, but at the same time, I feel like I had to be patient with myself and be patient with the story and be patient with knowing that I will get the information I need to get. And also, it was very difficult being that the University of Wisconsin-Madison doesn't archive the history as much of Black students. It was so hard to find and recover, and it was so hard to actually find the people who can give me these narratives, who were here during that time. I feel like I've done all that I can within the short amount of time that I had, but I've definitely learned patience and just making sure that I put the story first before technicality.
Marquise, thank you so much for showing us your film, and good luck next year and your senior year.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Now let's take a look at a clip from our next student film. It's called The Other 7% and was produced by a pair of student filmmakers, AJ Garcia and Ken Kozarowski.
I don't have that many memories of us being a family, and then he moved out when I was 4, and then they got divorced when I was 5. So they were only divorced for maybe 9 months, and then he unfortunately committed suicide. Now it's just kind of like I respect his wishes, and obviously I love him and I miss him, and I want the best for him. So I try and live a life that would make him proud. When I was in high school, I started a women's ultra-soft apparel line. I'm wearing it actually. So it's called Angelic NYC. So everything is angel wings. A portion of the profits go to different charities. So for instance, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. So that's in honor of my dad. So it's all about being the best person you can be and realizing that all of us have unlimited potential, and that to just think good thoughts, and hopefully you can be your best person, and then you can transfer that energy onto others and to help other people. I do think I am very happy and that I am very positive, but obviously people look at you in different ways than you look at yourself, if that makes sense. So if people were to describe me I'm sure positive or happy, probably would be one of the first things that they would say. My mom calls me her ray of sunshine, and I've always been a sunny person, but it means a lot more to me, I think. I'm not trying to bring anyone else down or more than other people, but being that way does mean a lot to me, and that it breaks my heart to see other people suffer, and that I'm really sensitive, and I pick up on people's feelings and what's going on quickly. So I just feel that it's my purpose basically to spread joy and spread love in the world. So I try and do as much as I can to do that.
That was a clip from The Other 7%. The filmmakers Ken Kozarowski and AJ Garcia are here with me today. First, tell me about about the film itself and about what is exactly The Other 7%.
Sure. So at its core, the documentaries about how students on this campus deal with depression. And the title we got from stats that we found from just last year, where 93% of college students in the nation, even at their lowest point, would choose life. And the other 7% seriously considered suicide. So we wanted to explore how people on this campus have dealt with such an intimate issue like depression, and in most cases from who we interviewed, took things from that and actually learned to better themselves and learn some things about themselves.
AJ, the other 7%?
Yeah, we chose to tell this story through the lens of college students because it was the other 7% who were college students who seriously contemplated suicide a year ago. So while not all the students have stories, their own stories of depression and suicide, you see that, like a lot of diseases, all of us are affected by it. And so we chose that this was the best way to communicate that message was through the lens of college students.
This is obviously not an easy story to tell. The stories that the students give you in the film are very personal. Was it difficult to find students who were willing to talk this openly about the topic?
Initially, when we looked into the topic, we thought that it would be tough, but like I said, it's not all the stories are people who have considered suicide necessarily. So everyone's been affected by it. So you hear stories of people who have lost someone to suicide. You see people that are dealing with depression, other people that have considered it at an earlier time in their life. So once we changed our approach and realized that we didn't need to talk to only people that contemplated suicide, it became a little bit easier because you see that we are still all affected by it.
And the people that we talked to were just very vocal and really open to talking about it from the beginning, and they were pretty removed from their events, years ago, and so they've had the time to really reflect on how some struggles in their life actually come around and help them in a different situation. We had one person who went through these suicidal struggles, and then actually from his experiences, he was able to actually help coach someone through who was struggling through the very same thing.
I don't know if you guys have thought about this necessarily in this process, but I'd like each of you to tell me what you hope that viewers, what the audience will take away from this film after they've watched it. Ken, you first.
Sure. I think for that 93% out there who doesn't have these kinds of thoughts and are doing well according to them, I think the key thing is for them to be able to know that some people, even right next to you or in your classroom, could be going through some very serious things. So being able to reach out and try and develop deeper relationships with people and actually try and make lasting, meaningful relationships, because with our culture and social media, it's very easy to be kind of superficial in the relationships that you build. So for the 93% out there who have not contemplated suicide, I hope that they realize that some people close to them or a little ways away might actually be going through something serious, and if they take the time and effort, they can actually be helpful in the recovery process.